particularly when we're talking about marginalized youth, whether it's because of their experiences, because of their language, because of historical situations around ethnicity or culture or gender or whatever it might be, that what we want to be able to do is really very clearly articulate a big level vision of what success involves. And we want to always, always know that what we're aiming for these students is high intellectual performance, and that their languages and cultures and experiences are a way that we can get to that outcome. And so it becomes really important as we're beginning to voice that we're clear about what we're doing, because particularly now there's such an emphasis on data and people saying that we're data driven, and I say no, we're not. You know, at least I don't want to be data driven. I want to be values driven. I want to make sure that the things that I prize and that I value and that I believe in are what's driving the work that we do, and that what we do then is really based on certain principles, and then that data and research inform that work. And that's, I think, a different way of approaching this work. And if we're going to do that, we can't do it in the absence of the young people themselves. That we can actually provide the stage for them to be able to play very powerful roles in envisioning their own future and creating powerful futures for themselves. And I love this quote from Bob Moses in Radical Equations, who says, "We believe in these young people, that they have the energy, the courage, the hope to devise means to change their conditions." So I think that's what we're about in this series, that we want to see how we can tap into the strengths and the power that students already bring with them, but that often gets rendered invisible in our systems, in our official systems. So when we talk about culturally and linguistically responsive pedagogy, what we're talking about is really creating learning opportunities that incorporate and build on the assets that students are bringing with them into our classrooms. And it's an approach that's really situating learning in students' lives. And what we want to do is talk about ways that, let me see if I can get out of there. We want to talk about ways that what we're doing with our students can be transformative, in the sense it can be validating, it can be all of those. Let's see, here we go. Okay. It can empower students to take responsibility for their own work in our classrooms and out of our classrooms, in our school communities, in their home communities. These are the types of descriptors that we want people to use when they're talking about the sort of work that we're doing, especially in the arts. And the work that we're going to be talking about is very much within the scope of our core principles. And in your handout, in your booklet, you have those core principles listed. But it really focuses in on the first three of these core principles around rich and affirming learning environments, empowering pedagogy, and challenging and relevant curriculum. So first, and at the very heart of the work that we're going to be doing around culturally and linguistically responsive pedagogy is a particular kind of sociocultural context for schooling our students. What we say is that we want to be able to provide our students with safe and affirming learning environments, environments that are non-threatening, where it's the norm for our students to be able to interact, to collaborate, to communicate, to negotiate meaning with their peers, where they're able to speak the truths that represent their lives and their experiences, where their education, the education they experience, is more like gifted education than like remedial education, where they're able to share equitably in the allocation of power and resources as they come to play in the school system. We want learning environments that represent spaces for high intellectual performance. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. We want to be able to positively and affirmingly develop our students' identities, and those identities include their cultures and their languages. We want to make sure that as a result of their interactions with us in our classrooms, that they become self-confident, self-motivated, resilient individuals who know themselves well and can make a place for themselves in the world. We want to make sure that we help them develop all of those critical skills that they need to do well in school and to thrive in a 21st century environment. And we want to create environments for high status arts work for students that by design uses and builds their multilingualism and their multiculturalism. There are probably 4 areas that we want to look at as we're trying to build these affirming learning environments. One is that we need to think about community so that students feel like they belong in these classrooms and in these schools, and so they're able to establish positive relationships with other students and with the adults around them. We want to make sure that there's a sense of self-determination so that students' identities are affirmed rather than either ignored or eradicated, both of which happen fairly consistently in our systems for some of our students. We want to make sure that they receive the sorts of support they need to be able to speak out, for example, when what's happening in the classroom or in the school isn't meeting their needs or the needs of their peers. We also want to make sure that we build trust and respect so that our students can develop empathy for each other and even a certain generosity of spirit. And we want to make sure that we build in democracy so that our students are involved in the decision-making that affects them most deeply, that really affects the course of their lives, where they can be engaged in solution-seeking around the things that are important to them and to their communities. The second piece is that we need to make sure that we utilize a certain type of pedagogy that's really focused on our students' experiences and interests and needs to know. We want to make sure that we've structured in learning by design. We want to make sure that students have the opportunity to address issues of social justice, which aren't just, for many of them, aren't just academic issues. These are issues that they grapple with every day in school, certainly, and in their communities, and that have huge impact on their lives and the lives of their families. There's something that's called the Pedagogy of Confidence. This comes from the National Urban Alliance. And it says that learning results when we're successful in helping students to combine understanding and motivation with confidence and competence. And these are some of the essential practices associated with the Pedagogy of Confidence. And it fits very nicely. It really just lays right on top of some of the things that we're talking about in terms of the pedagogy that we want to use. And then the third piece is that we want to make sure that we have a curriculum that's complex, that's coherent, that's well articulated, that builds in multilingualism and multiculturalism, that's anti-racist by design, that helps our students engage meaningfully with really purposeful, interesting work that's student-centered, that allows for the embedding of authentic reflection and assessment. So these are some of the things that we want to look at. in order to look at these things, what it means is that we have to go from discourse one style of operating to a discourse two. And we're going to post on the web the articles related to this. But it really comes about from some of the work of Eubanks, Parrish, and Smith, where they explain how the dominant discourse in our institutions is really about status quo, about coming up with the rationalization for why we do what we do, even when it gets us the results that are so devastating to so many of our students and their families. And to do this new work, we have to have a new way of being and acting and talking. And so you'll get a chance to look at some of this in practice, but also in looking at the article.